Foods for pain relief. Everything from a headache to a backache. Coming up on the exam room. Welcome, my friends, to the Exam Room Live, brought to you by the Physicians Committee. Hi, I'm the weight loss champion, Chuck Carroll, raising health IQs coast to coast and around the world. More than 150 countries. Thank you so very much for making the Exam Room one of the most consumed nutrition podcasts anywhere on the planet today. Did you know that everyday foods can act kind of like nature's Tylenol? Everything from a headache and what kind of foods are going to help with cramps or back pain or arthritis. Foods that fight pain. Those are our topics today. And weighing in today, there we go, is leading nutrition researcher and author of a book called Foods That Fight Pain, Dr. Neal Barnard. And if there's a question that you have for Dr. Barnard, post it in the comments or in the chat, and we're going to get to as many as we possibly can here on the program today. And with that, let's get going and welcome Dr. Barnard to the Exam Room Live. Thanks for being here, my friend.
Well, thank you, Chuck. It's great to see you.
Great to see you, too. Before we dive into this is a big-time topic. I do have some exciting news that I want to share with the exam roomies, if you'll indulge me for just a moment, sir.
You bet.
All right. The exciting news is this. Yesterday was Giving Tuesday, but our Giving Tuesday matching challenge has been extended. And that means that if you did not have a chance to contribute yesterday to the Physicians Committee, you can do that today. Or if you've donated already, why not be twice as generous? And dollar for dollar, your donations will be matched. So please join us in the fight for a healthier and more compassionate world by taking advantage of this opportunity to have your donation matched dollar for dollar. Your gift today will help us continue to push for better science and medicine, better health policies, and better lives for people and animals. And you can get in on this right now. PCRM.org/GT. PCRM.org/GT for Giving Tuesday. Make your donation go twice as far to make the world a healthier place. That's some pretty big news there, Dr. Barnard.
It sure is. A lot of people are eager to support a cause. And when they discover that their donation is actually going to go twice as far because a generous donor is matching it, that's terrific.
$1 becomes $2, $2 becomes $4, $5 becomes $10. Give what you can. PCRM.org/GT for Giving Tuesday. Dr. Barnard, I am thrilled also today to be talking about pain-relieving foods. A lot of research goes into finding out how we can find these natural remedies. And I know that we do so many studies here in-house, and that book that you wrote some years ago now, we're not going to age you, Foods That Fight Pain, it is still as prevalent today as it was the day that it was released. When it comes to foods that fight pain, is it fair to say that some of them truly can be like nature's Tylenol?
Or even better. I have to say, what inspired me to actually write this was, it must have been 20-some years ago. I was sitting here at my desk and the phone rang. And it was a young woman who called to say that she had menstrual cramps, which are very common. But for maybe 1 in 10 women, it's maybe, like I can't get out of bed today type pain. She had a business trip. She said, I can't get out of bed. I can barely move. And the reason she was calling me is she wanted a pretty heavy duty painkiller prescription. And I said, well, I can give you that for a couple of days. Let me give you some painkillers. But I started to think, what is it that's causing menstrual pain? And I happened to remember that there had been some studies done in Boston at Tufts University where they noticed that certain diet changes would reduce estrogen levels in a woman's body. So if they ate more fiber, estrogen levels came down. If they ate less fat, estrogen levels came down. And if your estrogen levels come down, that means there's less stimulation on the uterus to go through the monthly changes. So I got the idea that if she ate more fiber and ate less fat, that it may well be that her endometrial lining, which is what's swelling up each month and disintegrating and releasing prostaglandins that cause pain, I was thinking maybe this kind of diet change would help. So for the first month, I gave her 2 days of pretty heavy duty painkillers so she could function. But then she agreed to try a diet that had no animal products in it for the next month, but also kept oils really, really low, the kind of diet we've been using since. And it was a miraculous cure. She had no pain at all the next month or the month after that until she would loosen up the diet, then it came back. So that was a cure. And so we then did a randomized trial with a large group of women and found that it in fact works. So that was the inspiration behind this, Chuck. And after that, we started to realize, wow, if I change my diet in certain ways, it may be that a painful condition that comes over and over and over again can be tackled.
Well, let's get into it because Amanda has a question just like this. Can certain foods help with menstrual cramps? And if so, which ones?
Yeah. Okay. Great question. When a woman's got cramps, what she's very likely going to be told to do is to go get something warm and put it on her abdomen, and to go to the store and get various painkillers. And that's all okay to do. There's no reason not to. However, I would suggest that a person really try what I described, and it's two steps, and they're both important. The first is avoid animal products. When you do that, everything you're eating is from a plant, and that means it has fiber, and a high fiber diet moderates estrogen levels in a good way. So what that means is at the end of the month, the endometrium, which is the inner lining of the uterus, which thickens up every month in anticipation of pregnancy, it's not thickening up too much because you haven't had too much estrogen. And keeping fat low is really important. It's just as important. So there's so much fat in restaurant food, in cooking oils we might use at home, nuts, seeds, guacamole, and avocados. So leave those things aside, but don't worry about it. Fruits, fine. Vegetables, fine. Grains and beans, all fine. Keep oils low. And if you do this for one full cycle, one period to the next period, see if your cramps don't diminish or outright go away.
Very interesting. We've heard about that also being helpful, the dietary switch for women who are living with endometriosis, and they have found significant relief from that. I know that that's something you and I have talked about a lot in the past as well.
Yeah, and to understand what's happening, what we might call primary dysmenorrhea, basic cramps, that's the uterus has this inner lining, the endometrial layer, the endometrium. It's a very thin little layer, but it thickens up each month because it's anticipating pregnancy, which means the implantation of the embryo inside. So it thickens up, and then at the end of the month, it disintegrates. And that disintegration is where the pain and the cramping all comes from. With endometriosis, those endometrial cells have somehow migrated outside the uterus, and they'll implant up on the ovary or on a fallopian tube or on your intestinal tract. And every month they swell and they bleed and they scar and they cause adhesions. And your doctor will give you painkillers and hormonal treatments, may prescribe surgery, but in many, many, many cases, it just continues and continues and continues. So we use the same kind of diet. And it's, again, vegan diet. Plus, we want to really keep oily foods really low. Even healthy fats, because they all seem to raise estrogen levels. Oh, and by the way, Chuck, I got to tell you a little surprise that I had in the course of this. In the menstrual pain study that we did to follow up this hypothesis to see if it really would work, we had a large group of women. They all had menstrual cramps. And it was done in conjunction with Georgetown University's Department of OBGYN. The study gets started, and one of the women had been following the diet, and she felt better and was doing really well. But then we had set a rule for everybody coming into the study. And the rule was we can't be using any kind of hormonal treatments because that's going to confuse the study. If you're taking birth control pills, for example, that might wipe out the menstrual pain. So if a woman was sexually active, we asked them to use some other kind of birth control. So one of the women said, well, don't worry about me. I don't take the pill. I don't need anything because I'm infertile. I said, well, how do you know you're infertile? She says, my husband and I tried for years to have a baby. We were both evaluated. The doctor told me I can't have a baby. I'm not fertile. The second month that she was on the low-fat vegan diet, she came into the study center and said, Dr. Barnard, I've got to leave your study. I said, why? What's going on? She says, I'm pregnant. And Chuck, it was the most wonderful thing. About 5-6 years later, something like that, I was giving a lecture in another city, and she was there. That turned out to be that's where she had moved there, and she came there and introduced me to her kids. And so the point being that our hormones are strongly affected by the foods that we eat. Most people have no idea of this, and their doctor may not know it either, and so they don't intervene. So getting the greasy stuff out of the diet, making the fiber intake pretty generous, that allows estrogen levels to come down to the level that Mother Nature had in mind for us. So endometriosis, primary dysmenorrhea, and maybe even fertility issues tend to get better.
Very cool story, man. Very cool story.
Yeah.
I want to bring a topic up now that is something that everybody who's watching and viewing has dealt with at one time or another, and that is the headache. And Ashley is wondering, what foods might we want to turn to when our head starts pounding, Dr. Barnard?
Okay, great question. And you said it. These are really, really, really common. Let's back up. Question number one really is, what kind of headache is it? Because the migraines are the ones where people are really trying to figure out, is food going to help? Because a migraine doesn't just last 20 minutes. You know, it can last hour after hour. It can go overnight into the next day. And a migraine is a pounding headache. It's not just a dull ache. It's pounding usually, and it's often on one side of the head as opposed to both. It can be on both sides, but usually one. And along with it, you are sick. Nausea, vomiting. The reason that I emphasize these things is some people will have a dull headache that came when we were sleep deprived and some aggravating things are happening in our lives or in our work or something like that. And that is often a tension headache. And they're completely different. A tension headache is the muscles. You know, we have little muscles on the sides of our head. This goes back to our ancestors who could maybe wiggle their ears or something like that. You have muscles there on the sides of your head and on the front and the back. And they can cramp up. And when they do, the blood supply does not go freely through. And so you get some pain. And so the answer is win the lottery so you don't have any problems anymore. Okay, no, seriously. Deal with whatever the source of tension is. And you certainly can take Tylenol, aspirin, whatever it may be, and that will help. But the tension headache goes away. The migraine headache that is continuing is the one where people really feel like they've got a sledgehammer against their head. So a couple of things I would suggest. By the way, if the headache is happening now, as opposed to something you need to prevent, a surprise may come for a lot of folks. You brew some really serious, strong coffee and drink it down. And for a lot of people, that knocks out their headache. And caffeine is a potentiator of painkillers and has some painkilling effect on its own. Some people have also used ginger. You see cases where a person will take a little cup of water, put about a quarter teaspoon of ginger as early in the migraine as possible, drink it down, see how you do. But I like to suggest a preventive strategy. If you get migraines frequently, look for triggers. There can be triggers of all kinds. Yes, there can be weather triggers and stress triggers and things like that, but there can be diet triggers as well. And there can be foods that seem to cause it to happen more frequently. And in fact, let me give you a list. Dairy products. And by the way, in this case, it's the protein. It's probably not, the dairy fat is bad in every way, but it's probably the protein that's doing it. So dairy products, chocolate, eggs, citrus fruits, meat, wheat, nuts, tomatoes, onions, corn, apples, and bananas. Now, what you're going to notice is, wait a minute, what's wrong with an apple? What's wrong with bananas? What's wrong with an orange? The answer is nothing. But you might have known people who are sensitive to strawberries, they get a rash. They're allergic to strawberries, they can't have them. There are some people who do react to bananas or apples or tomatoes or citrus fruits. Not very often, but it does happen. So if a person is getting migraines frequently and you want to see if you can knock them out, avoid those trigger foods for a while and just see if the migraines don't go away. And if they do, you've got gold, because you can figure out how to really tame your migraines.
For sure. And Cynthia, who's watching right now on YouTube, says that she's had migraines for a long time and was eventually diagnosed with histamine intolerance. A lot of those foods that you've listed, I'm sure, are probably on the list that she probably should be avoiding as well, huh?
Yeah, they are. And foods that we're sensitive to cause the body to even release histamines naturally. So here's a way to do it. You could do all kinds of testing. There are doctors who will do skin testing and so forth. You may or may not want to bother with that. You could do a simple thing just on your own. That list that I just gave you, which maybe we can send out, or I can give it to you again at the end of the show, because it actually relates to other conditions, not just migraines. But what you do is you take a month, or maybe even less, and you just avoid all those foods and emphasize in your diet what I'm going to call pain-safe foods. So rice, especially brown rice, vegetables, especially cooked vegetables, cooked fruits like applesauce, Make your condiment be something like maybe just salt or a little maple syrup, but not a huge range of spices. And make your beverage be water. And it's a bland diet, but you're not limiting calories, so you're not hungry. You're just eating lots of rice and lots of vegetables and fruits, and you're avoiding the pain causing foods altogether. Now, once your migraines settle down and they stop coming, now we want to bring those foods, those trigger foods, back into the diet one at a time to see which one's the guilty party. So I'm going to start at the bottom of the list, which is bananas. So for 2 days, have bananas. Have a lot of them so that you can trigger a migraine. And if 2 days go by and you don't have a migraine and you're eating a lot of bananas, then that's not your trigger. Keep them. You can keep eating bananas. Then bring in apples. That's next up on my list. So have 2 or 3 apples today, 2 or 3 apples tomorrow. If it didn't trigger a migraine, keep them. Now, let's say I have citrus fruits or wheat, and it does trigger a migraine. Set it aside. Test it again later. But you may have 2 or 3 different triggers. And in this systematic way of finding them, once you identify the trigger for your pain, it is such a gift because then you can avoid that food. Down the line, you can test it again to confirm, but that's the way we do it. So take a couple of weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, avoid the pain triggers altogether, bring them back in one at a time every 2 days in generous quantities, see which one triggers pain. And when you find your triggers, there you are.
Somewhat of a in the weeds question here, but there are 18 billion varieties of apple. Is it possible that, say, a Granny Smith would not be a problem, whereas a Red Delicious might?
Yes, it can. Great question. Absolutely, yes, it can. And these things are so idiosyncratic. You'll just have to see. And let's say potatoes are a trigger, but you might discover that you have no problem with a really thoroughly cooked potato, like French fries that have been in the oven for 45 minutes or something like that, because the proteins have gotten all denatured. Whereas the potato that was just sort of lightly cooked and then mashed might cause more of a problem because the proteins are still intact.
All right, let's talk about back pain. This is another one. I was surprised when you and I were talking about doing the show. You said, well, I hope that we have a question on back pain because this is something that a lot of people don't recognize specifically could be tied to a person's diet. Joshua is watching right now, wants to know what are some natural pain relieving foods that can help with the pain in the back?
Okay, great question. Probably the best known is turmeric, which is used a lot. You've probably seen these little capsules of turmeric that they sell at health food stores and also regular drug stores. They sell them. Typical dose would be about maybe 500 milligrams a day. Some people use maybe 1,000, 1,500, something like that. It's an anti-inflammatory. It does what ibuprofen does. So a lot of people use it. There are a lot of studies on it. Fine. But let me go back to what is actually causing back pain for many people, because it's a surprise. When you look at kids who've got kind of a sore back, and they're maybe 17, 18, 20, 21, 22, researchers have started to notice something really surprising, which is that if you do vascular studies, you notice that some of their blood vessels are blocked. If you picture your spine goes all the way from the bottom of your head down to your hips. And between every vertebral body pair, there's a disc. And a disc is a little leathery pillow. It's leathery on the outside, and inside it's really soft. And for some people, that little leathery pillow disc between your vertebrae has broken. And when the pillow breaks, the inside stuffings come out and they push on a nerve, and that causes pain. It causes pain locally and all the way down your leg. And so researchers started to discover that some people, even really young people, have had a blockage of an artery that was leading to a certain part of their spine. And so the disc was not getting good blood flow, and it was degenerating on its own. Now, discs don't have arteries going to them directly. They're just getting by diffusion oxygen that has come nearby them. And so if you got a blocked blood supply, the discs are going to degenerate, and this will happen quite frequently. So the reason I mention kids is that you see by around age 20 or so, you'll see people who've already completely lost one of their lumbar arteries as a result of smoking or a bad diet. Smoking and meaty diets cause atherosclerosis, and we're familiar with heart disease. But who would have thought that you could choke off the arteries to the back, cause the discs to degenerate as a result of not getting good blood flow or good oxygen, I really should say, and then the disc herniates out and causes pain. So this is really a good preventive step, so that we don't see continued problems with this, where you can have more than one disc go bad. The other thing is discs can sometimes heal themselves. So don't opt in for surgery if you don't absolutely need it. And maybe my last tip here is, if you've got a bulging disc, don't assume that you need surgery. About 20% of people normally have a little bit of a disc bulge. It comes and it goes, comes and goes, and it may not be causing your pain at all.
All right, follow-up question on the turmeric. Laura at 1223, she's watching on YouTube, wants to know if you could explain how to pair it or what to look for maximum adoration, or what to look for on the label. So how can we maximize that absorption, Dr. Barnard?
Oh, with the turmeric, it's highly absorbable as it is. I wouldn't worry. You will see many brands. You can try one out and see how it works for you. But maybe an issue also is dosage. The dosages will vary as well. And so the amount that I listed that I mentioned is more typical for clinical use. Between about 500 and 1500 milligrams a day would be pretty typical.
Yeah, a lot of people say maybe pair it with black pepper, same way that kind of vitamin C can increase iron absorption through plant-based sources. What do we know about that?
Well, you can, but what you're really doing in that case is combining two painkillers that have synergistic action. People might have experienced this where you've got a sore joint or something like that, and you say to the practitioner, "What's natural? What's going to help me naturally?" They say, "Well, go to the store, get some capsaicin cream." So you go to the store, you get the ointment bottle, you put it on your elbow, and it kind of tingles. You think, "Oh, wow!" And then as the tingling goes away, the pain goes away along with it. Well, what's capsaicin cream? It's hot peppers. It's the capsaicin is the hot in a hot pepper. And researchers discovered a long time ago that it's a natural painkiller, and it's true whether you eat it or it's true whether you put it on externally. So you're absolutely right. You can have anything hot, not temperature hot, but spicy type hot, and you can have that along with the turmeric, and you're getting two painkillers in one.
Interesting. When I was looking at your book, Foods That Fight Pain, right up at the top of the description on Amazon, it talked about maybe the fact that sugar could increase a person's sensitivity to pain. Maddie has a question about that, wondering whether if in fact that is true. What do we know about the connection?
Yeah, I think these things are very, very idiosyncratic, meaning it may happen to you and it may not happen to you. It may happen to you and not to somebody else. Or at certain phases of life, you're more sensitive than at other times. I would say simply just give it a test and see if it works for you too. And the test is you just avoid artificial sugars. Don't avoid natural sugars like the sweetness in an apple or something like that, unless it's a trigger. But the natural sugars that are in fruits in particular are something that our species has been dealing with for a long period of time, and we tolerate them really perfectly well.
All right, Jessica, what can I eat to reduce inflammation that's been caused by arthritis?
Okay. Let me kind of repeat some of the things I mentioned earlier because they apply to migraine. They also apply to arthritis. We mentioned turmeric. Turmeric is probably used for arthritis more than just about any other supplement, but that trigger list that I gave also applies to arthritis. We did a research study here at the Physicians Committee where we brought in people who had rheumatoid arthritis. And we asked them first to go on a vegan diet. Now, what does the vegan diet do? It knocks out dairy products, for one thing, which happens to be the most common trigger. And as I mentioned earlier, it's the dairy protein that's really aggravating the joint. And by aggravating, what do I mean? Your body has the ability to mount an immune defense. Your white blood cells are waiting for bacteria or viruses to come into your body. And when they do, your white blood cells make antibodies to attack the virus. But those same antibodies can end up attacking you. They can get into your joints and attack the synovial membrane. That's the lining of your joint. They can attack your thyroid gland, leading to hypothyroidism. Or hyperthyroidism in some cases. They can attack the digestive tract. They can attack all kinds of things. So that's an autoimmune reaction. And the question is, what triggered it? Well, it may be a virus, but it may be some foreign protein that's not a virus, like the dairy protein. So a person stops consuming dairy products. There's no more dairy protein going into their body, and their white cells no longer have anything to react to. They stop making the antibodies, and their joints cool down. So what we have done is in the study that I mentioned, everybody went vegan for about 4 weeks, and that avoids the dairy proteins, it avoids the animal proteins, and it avoids eggs. These are all big triggers. If they still have pain, then we do the elimination diet that I mentioned earlier, where dairy products, chocolate, eggs, citrus fruits, and the whole rest of the list are then eliminated and brought back in one at a time. And you can see, first of all, subjectively, how do you feel? The other thing you can do is objectively measure your CRP level, C-reactive protein, sign of inflammation, and you can see it just goes once you avoid the triggers that you've identified.
It seems to me like instead of talking about really specific foods, like if you stub your toe, eat asparagus. If you have a problem with your finger, eat an apple. It really seems like the key in terms of finding pain relief from food is more or less eliminating a lot of those animal-based products. Am I kind of putting those dots together correctly?
I think you're exactly right, because we're sort of looking for just what you said. If I've got joint pain, eat a banana. If I've got a headache, eat an apple or whatever. And to some extent, you can do that. But for the most part, it has to do with overall, there are broad classes of foods that are triggering the pain. We want to find out what they are and avoid them. And there are certain foods that help our bodies to stay in better hormonal balance, and we want to bring those in.
How difficult is it to find what the best of the best are in terms of, well, if it is a headache, maybe we should be eating a lot more or drinking a lot more coffee or just finding that specific food? I would imagine a study like that would take an exorbitant amount of time and money to do. And frankly, there's millions of types of foods out there. So where would one even start?
There are. But the beauty of it is if a person has pain frequently, if you've got a headache every couple of days, then you are your own best research participant. And you can track these things for yourself. So let's say a person gets a migraine and they take some coffee and it knocks it out. Fine, that's good. Then you've got that tool that you can use. If it didn't work, on to something else. And we have seen that when we do these elimination diets, typically people only have to do them one time in their whole life, because when they do it, they identify their triggers. But their triggers may be completely different from somebody else's trigger. And so it's a great thing to do that and identify.
Going back to the coffee and the headache question, some people are wondering whether espresso might be the best option because you said brew up some really strong coffee, and it doesn't get much stronger than that.
The stronger, the better. Yeah, exactly. And you don't need lots of it, but what matters is speed. Get that migraine early.
Gotcha. All right. And
by the way, decaf doesn't work.
It's the caffeine. Don't some over-the-counter pain relievers have caffeine in them for that very same reason?
Lots of, yes. Yes. And if you take a regular pain reliever and of any type and add caffeine along with it, it potentiates the action. It makes the painkiller stronger.
Gotcha. What about post-workout kind of muscle aches and pains? Our colleague, Dr. Jim Loomis, has a famous post-workout smoothie that he talks about. But from your perspective, is this also a case of it's more what you don't eat than what you do?
All of the above do matter. What you're doing when you're working your muscles is the muscles will become inflamed. And you can feel it, and it feels like pain and so forth. And the muscles are also a little bit ischemic, meaning they haven't been able to quite keep up with the oxygenation that they need. Once you stop the workout, all those things start to get better. But you can, number one, avoid the pro-inflammatory foods. That's dairy products, meat. Avoid those things. Secondly, you can bring in the anti-inflammatory foods, particularly the fruits, vegetables, colorful ones, because the color is the antioxidant in them. And the third thing is you're going to hear lots of people talk about turmeric. Again, athletes use it a lot. We talked about its use for sore joints. People also use it for sore muscles. Totally optional. You don't have it. You don't have to have it. You don't have to use it. But many, many people do safely.
What about recovering from an injury? Let's say that, somebody messes up their knee pretty good. What about somebody who's got kind of that long-term injury? Is there a way that with this diet that would reduce the inflammation, would that then also kind of speed up the recovery process? Have there been studies on that?
It's funny you'd say that. I was with Dr. Kim Williams, who Dr. Williams, terrific cardiologist, who's long promoted a healthy vegan diet for heart health. But we were discussing Novak Djokovic, who is a great top tennis player, who, like all tennis players, every now and then will have an accident or rip something. And he did have a serious injury, but he bounced back remarkably quickly. And Novak Djokovic is not the youngest person on the court. And Dr. Williams and I were talking about it, and he said, he's been following a plant-based diet for a long time. So his recovery is just faster than other people. And that is what we do see when people are on healthier diets, their recovery typically is quicker. That said, the body is fragile, and you can tear a ligament, you can tear a muscle, you can pull a muscle. All these things can happen, no matter what kind of diet you're on. And there is nothing like rest and giving yourself a little bit of time to recover, even if a healthy plant-based diet will speed that recovery.
All right, let's take a question from Angela here at 1221. She's watching on YouTube today. She says, I've had severe fibromyalgia for years. I used to be 320 pounds, but I've lost 175 by following Dr. Barnard and many other plant-based doctors. Gotten better, but still have a little bit of that chronic pain. Now, I know that fibromyalgia was something that was covered in your book. What do we know in terms of maybe finding some relief for Angela and other fibromyalgia sufferers out there?
Okay, well, first of all, Angela, you have done great. I mean, look what you've achieved.
Yeah.
The weight loss that you have had is something that very few people have achieved, and you've done that. So good on you. That's fantastic. But what is fibromyalgia? Fibromyalgia is, arthritis is pain in the joints. Fibromyalgia is pain between the joints, in the soft parts of the body, and you hurt. And you're also going to get annoyed because you go to the doctor who says, it's all in your head. There's nothing really wrong with you. And you think, wait a minute, there's something wrong with me because I'm hurting. And I'm sorry to tell you that people with fibromyalgia get referred for psychotherapy and all kinds of stuff when in fact they have a physical issue. And in fact, we've seen when people have been told that they have a totally psychosomatic issue, in probably 1 in 3 cases, they have an absolute organic issue that has to be identified. Okay, so anyway, enough of my speech. Back to what's wrong. We use exactly the same approach with fibromyalgia that we do with rheumatoid arthritis that I mentioned, which you can use anti-inflammatories like turmeric if you wish to. However, do a search and destroy. Figure out if there are triggers that are making your fibromyalgia worse. And if you find those triggers, then you just avoid them and see how you do. You have to be a little bit patient with yourself because the pain is almost like the weather. It kind of comes in, it sits there for a while, and it leaves only rather gradually. It's not instantaneous. But do the same kind of elimination diet. You avoid that list of foods. Bring them back in one at a time, have a generous amount, and see which one or more than one triggers the pain. And if so, take that one you've identified, set it aside. And let me repeat that list one more time in case somebody was writing it down or whatever. Dairy products, chocolate, eggs, citrus fruits, meat, wheat, nuts, tomatoes, onions, corn, apples, bananas. Again, not necessarily bad foods. It's just foods that for whatever reason, people tend to react to. And so those are the ones that we're going to set aside. You could react to something else. There are things that are really, really uncommon triggers, but that's the list that's pretty common.
All right, let's see if we can grab a couple of more before we wrap things up. Number one, more of a comment than a question. Jackfruit wontons. I just want to shout them out, one, because of the name. That's amazing, jackfruit wontons. They're watching in New Zealand. They say, you both have changed my life, and I'm so pleased to catch you live, and just wanted to say thank you in real time. Jackfruit's real name is Jessica, so thanks for watching, Jessica. Glad that you're raising your health IQ with the jackfruit wontons. That's a strong name. I love it.
Fabulous. Sounds like a brand that somebody's going to be marketing soon.
Jackfruit wontons. That's good. Somebody was wondering about a herniated disc. We were talking about a bulging disc. Is that the same thing? And if not, would the same rules kind of apply here?
Same thing. Yes, exactly. Again, your discs are between the vertebrae. So you've got bony vertebrae, one on top of the other, and between each one, to keep the bones from just scraping against each other, there are these little leathery discs. And when the inside pushes out, that's a bulging disc or herniated disc. It's herniated once the little pillowcase, if I can put it that way, has actually broken and the inside is sticking out. That happens to a lot of people. In some cases, it's asymptomatic, meaning just leave it alone and you might see it. The doctor may know it's there, but it's not a reason for surgery unless there are clear-cut symptoms that it can address. But lots and lots and lots of these are totally asymptomatic. And it's a two-way street. The same person who had a bulging disc and thought, oh man, it's not going to get better. You look at that same person later on and it can get better. So exercise, eat well, make sure that you're getting the blood flowing into your spine where you want it to be. And that's good aerobic exercise to the extent that you can tolerate it, and see how you do.
All right. And let's go back to Angela, who had the question about fibromyalgia. She's wondering, what are the best plant-based foods to get rid of visceral fat? So she's already lost 175 pounds. I would imagine that her pain level has dropped from that alone, but she wants to target that visceral fat, Dr. Barnard. What would you suggest?
Okay. Well, first, once again, congratulations on what you've already achieved. I hope you're letting everybody around you know what you've done. What I would suggest that we do is not focus on one food or another food, but focus on certain classes of foods. If a person has lost some weight, but they've kind of gotten stuck and they want to lose a little bit more, this is where we do a search and destroy for fatty foods. So has avocado toast entered your life? Well, avocados may be delicious, but it happens to be the one fruit that didn't read the owner's manual that said that fruit is supposed to be low in fat. Avocados are high in fat, and every fat gram has 9 calories. So set the avocados aside, nuts and seeds and vegetable oils, set those aside for now. You don't have to decide I'm never going to have them ever, but don't have them right now when you're trying to reach a weight loss goal, and see if that helps you to break through. So that's a really good step forward, and see if the weight doesn't come off.
All right. Well, we're going to go ahead and close up the doctor's mailbag for today. If we didn't get to your question, I promise you we will save it and do our best to get you an answer on an upcoming episode. Dr. Barnard, by the by, the current feels like temperature here is 28 degrees. It's actual 41, but it feels like 28 with the wind that is blowing right now. And that's okay, because coming up in a few months, we are going to the warm weather of South Florida in Miami, March 7th for your big Bon Voyage bash. And I am so excited that right before the party that night, Dr. Will Bulsiewicz and I will be on stage together for a very special episode of the Exam Room Live in Miami, and that is on March 7th. Tickets to the bash, they're already on sale. The podcast tickets are coming soon, but you, my friends, can join us, pcrm.org/event. While I've got you here, what's going to happen at this bash? I'm excited. I'm not sure that I've ever been to one of your notorious South Florida parties, Dr. Barnard.
Oh, we're going to have a great time. This tradition started because there's going to be the Holistic Holiday at Sea cruise leaving the next day. So people are in town from Pittsburgh and Chicago and New York and Kansas City and all over the place. And we all get together and we celebrate our last day on land before we get on the cruise the next day. So it's a blast. There's going to be plenty to eat and drink, and I hope people come and celebrate with us. It's also a fundraiser for the Physicians Committee. So anybody who would like to support the work that we're doing, we would absolutely love to have you there.
Absolutely, we would. And listen, don't forget our Matching Tuesday, even though it's Wednesday, that continues. So don't forget to head over to pcrm.org/GT to double your donation today automatically. So when you give $5, it becomes 10. When you give 10, that becomes 20, and so on down the line. So thank you guys so very much for continuing to fuel us here at the Physicians Committee, because we could not do our work and even this show without your support. So pcrm.org/GT. And Dr. Barnard, also today, I want to say a huge thank you to the Gregory J. Reiter Memorial Foundation for their continued support of organizations just like ours that carry on the love that Greg had for animals by promoting plant-based health and also working to end animal abuse while emphasizing programs to promote systemic change and benefit human beings as well. And you can visit them online at GregoryReiterFund.org. That's Gregory Reiter, Reiter, fund.org. You want to talk about a generous donor? That starts with Allison Mahoney, Dr. Barnard.
Yes, I have to say, Greg had such a warm heart for animals, and Allison has really carried that forward in such a generous way, making sure that people all the way around the world are understanding that animals need care and compassion. And here at the exam room, we're helping people to get them off your plate, and helping people to recover their health at the same time.
That's right. And get rid of that pain. We talked a lot about that today. So if you feel like you've raised your health IQ by a point or two, be sure to like this video and subscribe to us here on YouTube or follow us on Facebook. Dr. Barnard, thank you so very much for your time today, my friend. This has been great.
You bet. Thank you, Chuck.
And to the crew behind the scenes for making the magic happen, thank you guys as well. And you exam roomies, thanks for joining us from all around the world as we continue to make the world a healthier place altogether. And for everyone here at the Physicians Committee, I am the weight loss champion, Chuck Carroll. We will talk to you again very soon. But until then, keep it plant-based.